2023 was the hottest year we have ever recorded. It was so hot that climate scientists are still coming to terms with what happened. The year broke countless records while breaking our weather across the world. But climate scientists are already predicting that 2024 could be even hotter. So what happened last year? How could we possibly know what 2024 will hold when it's only just started? And what do we need to do to stop our home from overheating? I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And today I want to talk about whether 2024 will be the hottest year ever recorded. Spoiler alert, quite possibly. But let's talk about why. Before we get to 2024, we need to explain 2023. As you may have already heard if you were paying attention to this video about 1 minute ago, 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded. When I say ever recorded, what I mean is since humans have been measuring and writing down temperatures in lots of places across the world, giving us a decent idea of global temperatures. So since around 1850 or so. But climate scientists can do one better, and they have other ways of peering into the planet's past too. By piecing together the temperature traces left in everything from ocean sediments to ice cores to tree rings, scientists can be fairly confident that last year wasn't just the hottest in the last 150 years, but the hottest in 125,000 years, which would mean that the last time Earth was this hot, humans were still sharing the planet with these guys. This isn't just about the numbers. This record-breaking heat is costing us dearly, whether through the destruction it's driven or the lives it's claimed. It makes disasters that were once extremely rare more extreme, but less rare. That means sweltering heatwaves, devastating downpours, and raging fires, all of which 2023 saw time and time again all across the globe. And on top of that, we've seen the planet change like never before, with off-the-chart ice losses in the polar regions. Okay, so the obvious question is why? Why was it so hot? And the obvious answer is us. But that's only part of the answer, even though it is still the biggest part of the answer. By burning fossil fuels and emitting greenhouse gases, we're heating the planet up. And while not every year is a record breaker, every year is now one of the hottest years ever measured. In fact, every single year since 1983 has been, at the time, in the top 10 hottest years ever recorded. It's this human-caused heating that's responsible for the most mercury on the thermometer of last year's sweltering heat. But then added to that is the fact that last year was an El Niño year. El Niño translates to little boy, but saying that last year was a little boy year doesn't sound great, does it? Okay, anyway, there's a natural fluctuation in how hot the Pacific Ocean's surface is, and years when it's hot, El Niño years, boost global temperatures. So this time last year, because of the human heating of the planet, plus the little boy boost that climate scientists were expecting, I was already saying 2023 will be one of the hottest years that humans have ever recorded. And look, I don't want to say I told you so, but it's really hard not to right now. As climate scientists expected, 2023 was incredibly hot. But incredibly, it was even hotter than climate scientists had expected. It wasn't just a record year, but it also saw the record hottest day, the record hottest month, and a host of other devastating records crumbling. I mean, let's put it this way. When the United Nations Secretary General says the era of global boiling has arrived, you know that things aren't exactly chill. Researchers are still trying to unpick what could have made last year such a scorcher. Other factors beyond El Niño and the whole burning fossil fuels thing might have boosted temperatures further, from a drop in sulfur pollution to the eruption of an underwater volcano. Some researchers are even arguing that global warming might have sped up, but this is still hotly debated. Okay, but seriously, whether warming is speeding up is obviously super important, but it's also still super controversial. So I'm planning a video on what we know and, importantly, what we don't know really soon. You don't want to miss that, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. And speaking of subscribing, it means so much to me that throughout the changes and challenges of 2023, this community of climates has grown so much, more than doubling in the last 12 months. Since I don't try to sell you things with ads or product placements, I couldn't do this without my amazing patrons, people like Gary Stark, who support this channel. You can check out my Patreon over here, but if that's not for you, just by watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, you're already helping me communicate crucial climate science as widely as possible. So thank you all for helping make 2023 that little bit brighter. Which leads us to 2024. Scientists at the UK's Met Office have already projected that 2024 could be even hotter than 2023. That's because we're still emitting greenhouse gases, causing that whole global warming thing, plus there are the continued impacts of the El Niño. In fact, for the first time, the forecast predicts that the year could be more than 1.5 degrees C hotter than the reference period we use. This sounds pretty awful. And while it is most definitely not good news, this does not mean we've passed the 1.5 degree C limit that the world has agreed would keep us relatively safe, regardless of what fear-bait headlines like this one might suggest. The 1.5 limit refers to the average temperature over many years, not just a single year over 1.5 degrees C. But clearly a first year over that threshold would suggest we're getting concerningly close. So it's important to stress that passing 1.5 isn't a sharp transition for our climate. It is the limit that the world has agreed, but both before and after, every single fraction of a degree of warming that we can avoid makes a world of difference. It's also important to point out that the Met Office's prediction indicates 2024 could also be slightly cooler than 2023. This wouldn't mean that global warming has stopped. There's always some year-to-year variation, and 2024 would still be hotter than almost all other years that we've measured. There's an important lesson there about looking at the long-term trend, not just the year-to-year variation. You see, when I started working on climate change during my PhD, there was a whole host of climate deniers who were arguing that global warming had stopped because the last few years looked like this. And, well, you can see how sensible that claim turned out to be. Okay, but back to 2023 and 2024. These will be two of the hottest years that we have ever seen. But these 2 years will end up being relatively cool compared to what we have in store for us. That's because as long as we continue emitting, the world will continue heating. But wait, let's turn that idea around. Once we stop emitting, the world will stop heating. And 2023 saw a host of progress towards that goal, from countries finally agreeing to name and shame the climate culprit, fossil fuels, to the unstoppable rise in low-carbon technologies, meaning that emissions could have finally peaked and finally be about to decline. Is all of this enough progress? Absolutely not. But is it progress? Absolutely it is. I think these sweltering temperatures and our wavering politicians can make us feel like nothing is being done, but actions are already underway. Every action we take to shift away from fossil fuels means a fraction of a degree of warming we can avoid, which means lives saved. The world is already taking its first steps in the energy transition, and we can all have a role in transforming these steps into a sprint, whether it's through fighting for the structural changes we need, cutting our own emissions, or amplifying reliable info about climate change. Because despite the soaring temperatures, there's still the chance to make 2024 a record-breaking year for all the right reasons. We often have in our heads that climate change is a separate problem, disconnected from all the other threats that our world is facing. But this couldn't be further from the truth. Take the devastation of conflict and war. These are actively driving climate change, and here's why. Okay, until next time, bye. I am currently recovering from COVID, and so if you thought this video looked like it was edited by someone with brain fog, well, you're not wrong.